What is going on, guys? Welcome to the first game week review of the season and actually ever on this channel. I will be trying to do these all season long after every single game week. But first of all, before I get into reviewing game week 1, I understand that a lot of people will probably be looking at my team right now thinking, that's not a template team. This guy has absolutely no idea what he's doing. So I want to talk through just my decisions in terms of why I picked this team. And then after that, I'll go through each player's individual performance, how I'm feeling about it, if I'm thinking about making any changes, and then also just the ideas I have in terms of planning ahead for fixtures. So yeah, obviously, like I said, this is not a template team. And the reason for that is when I was picking this team, there was 4 players I had in mind that I thought absolutely have to go on my team. They're guarantees. And those 4 players were Erling Haaland, of course, Mohamed Salah, Marcus Rashford, and Bukayo Saka. So as you can see, they're obviously all on my team right now. I understand that the template midfield at the moment is that sort of Man United double up and Arsenal double up of Saka, Martinelli, Bruno Fernandes, and Marcus Rashford. But for me personally, and this is coming from a Man United fan as well, I just feel like Salah is more of a guarantee for attack and returns. So I had to find a way to get him into the team. So obviously I've got some sort of key players that are in those template teams missing. So for example, I've got Matty Cash, who's a 4.5 million defender, instead of Chilwell, who's 5.5 million. And then obviously I've got Alejandro Garnacho, who's probably the crazy pick in this team. He only has 2.7% ownership. And a lot of people go for the 6.5 million players instead, like Matoma, like Madison, like Mbuemo, because obviously they're a lot more nailed on for attacking returns. But like I said, for me personally, I had to find a way to get Mohamed Salah into this team. So I had to make cuts somewhere. So the main cuts that I made were, instead of Chilwell, I went for Matty Cash. And then instead of like the likes of Matoma, the likes of Mbuemo, I went for Garnacho instead. It was a little bit of a risk because Garnacho was obviously, he didn't start a lot last season. But I was pretty confident. I'm obviously a Man United fan and had watched pre-season games. And I was pretty confident that Garnacho was going to start the first game week just because of how he was performing in pre-season. Obviously that front 3 is nothing out of the ordinary, but that midfield and defense, yeah, it's completely different than the sort of normal FPL teams you're seeing at the moment. But like I said, I had to find a way to get Salah into that team, and I also was not willing to take a hit on the goalkeeper. So I've seen a lot of people rotating between Pickford and Turner because Pickford's only 4.5 million and Turner's 4 million, and then that means it frees up more money for their attack and their midfield. But for me personally, I wanted a goalkeeper who I know has a decent chance of keeping a clean sheet most games. And if I was to do that Pickford Turner thing that most players are doing, I don't think you're going to be really getting much points from those goalkeepers. I think the only chance you have of getting points off those goalkeepers is if they make a ridiculous amount of saves per game. So I'm pretty happy with my pick of Onana because he only costs 5 million, so he's not 5.5 like Pope, like Ederson, like Alisson. There is several other options for 5 million goalkeepers. Martinez at Villa is a good pick, but I do feel like Man United are more likely to keep clean sheets than Villa. So Onana over Martinez for me, and then the rest of the 5 million options like David Raya, like Ramsdale, they're a bit iffy because you don't really know who the starter is going to be there. So yeah, no, that brings me to Onana, and obviously we'll start covering game week 1. So we did get 9 points in game week 1. I'm not going to lie, that clean sheet was not by design. They were a little bit lucky to get that clean sheet. There probably should have been a penalty for Wolves at the end of that game, but at the end of the day, they got the clean sheet over the line. We'll take the 9 points. As you can see, I've got highlighted here the expected goals conceded for Onana, which was 2.27, so it was ridiculously high. And to be fair to Onana, he did make 6 saves, so there was some big saves that he made in the game. But yeah, for the most part, the reason for that clean sheet wasn't United defending really well. It was just Wolves really struggling to be clinical in front of goal. But yeah, Onana kept the clean sheet anyway, and he also got 1 bonus point, so I'm pretty happy with his performance. So moving on from Onana to Cash. So Cash was my budget pick. I would have obviously rather had Chilwell, but like I mentioned previously, I wanted to find a way to get Salah into that team without sacrificing too much on the goalkeeper. So the thing is with Matty Cash, I could be really deflated right now because he's got -1, and it's never nice to have a player on minus. I don't think anybody expected Villa to get battered the way they did by Newcastle. But saying all that, if you look at these statistics here, Matty Cash actually had an XG of 0.74, which is ridiculous for a defender. Now, I will admit that that is mostly down to the absolute sitter that he missed in the second half. So despite the -1, which is again never nice, I am actually encouraged by the performance of Matty Cash simply because he showed that he's going to be getting into the final third a lot, which means that there's a higher chance of him getting attacking returns. And for 4.5 million, I can't really complain. He does have 2 really good fixtures coming up. He's got Everton next week and then Burnley the week after. So for me, he's 100% keep. I'm not discouraged by the fact that got battered 5-1. I think Villa will improve as the season goes on. So yeah, Matty Cash, he will be staying in my team along with Onana. Moving on, obviously Gabriel. It was a bit of a shock that he wasn't playing. I believe that he played like 79 games consecutively or something stupid for Arsenal before the Forest game. So nobody was expecting him to be dropped. He does obviously have high ownership as well, 31.3%. I do see a lot of people sort of panic selling him right away, thinking he's going to be rotated out and he's no longer number 1 choice. From an FPL perspective, I think last season he had the highest XG for a defender. From a football perspective, it kind of made sense because they were playing Forest at home. Forest were just going to play a low block and Arsenal wanted to find a way to get Nketiah and Havertz into the team. So Gabriel, out of all the defenders that Arsenal have, Gabriel's probably the most mistake prone. So I can understand why he was dropped. Obviously, Partey played that like right back inverted role, which was kind of weird. But yes, I am not going to be selling Gabriel despite the fact he didn't start in game week 1. The reason for that is Timber is now injured and nobody knows when he's going to be back. It seems like it might be a bit of a serious injury, which is a shame for the lad. But I do expect Gabriel to come back into the team now that Timber is gone. I think what you'll probably see is Ben White will be moved from centre back out to right back again, and then Gabriel will just come into the team and take his place. So I won't be moving Gabriel out of the team anytime soon. And obviously, as you can see there, he has 2 decent game weeks coming up here as well against Palace and Fulham, so I would be seriously shocked if he didn't start either of those games. So moving on to Estupiñán, I was pretty happy with his performance as well. Obviously, he's a very popular FPL pick. He has 54.1% ownership. He did bag an assist, and there isn't really much to go into over that performance. It was pretty standard. I think we all expected Luton to lose pretty badly there. He does have Wolves and West Ham next, which are pretty favourable fixtures. But saying that, when it does come to game week 4 and 5, he's got Newcastle and Man United. So for me personally, I will be keeping Estupiñán for game week 2 and 3. But when it gets to Newcastle and Man United in game week 4 and 5, I am probably going to look to potentially move him out and bring Chilwell in somehow. And the reason for that is if you look at Chilwell's fixtures here from game week 3 right through there by game week 8, he has really good fixtures. Now, as you can see, Chilwell has already had a price increase from 5.5 to 5.6. And just to quickly give you an idea of how I'm going to potentially get Chilwell into the team, obviously Estupiñán only costs 5 million, so I might have to move the likes of Watkins out, who cost 8 mil. I could probably bring in a good 7 million striker like Jackson, like Richarlison. You've obviously got Isak as an option at 7.6. He was 7.5, but he's up to 7.6 now. So there is obviously cheaper options than Watkins, but I did want to start the season with Watkins simply just for the fact that I was unsure if Richarlison was going to be starting as the number 9 for Spurs, because obviously it wasn't clear if Kane was going to be leaving Spurs at that stage. And then in terms of Nicholas Jackson here, he's obviously new to the Premier League, so I wasn't 100% sure if he was going to hit the ground running. He looked good against Liverpool, and to be honest, he probably should have scored. He had an XG of 0.53, which is pretty decent. So he probably should have scored against Liverpool. He has West Ham next, so I'm going to see how he gets on against West Ham. And then if he does well against West Ham, I'm probably going to bring him in at game week 3 because he's got Luton, which is, probably the easiest fixture in the league right now. Sorry to any Luton fans watching. And then obviously from Luton, he then has Forest, Bournemouth, and then, a load of good fixtures after that. So Nicholas Jackson is definitely on my radar at the moment. And then obviously that will free up the funds that I need to bring in Chilwell at defense as well for those fixtures. Obviously we went a bit off track there, so sorry about that, but I do just want to make sure that I'm explaining my thought process and sort of how I'm planning ahead for the next few game weeks. But moving on to the midfield, I was pretty happy with the performance of the midfield. Obviously Saka got me a goal and the 3 bonus points. Like I said, Saka was one of those players that I wanted in my team 100%. I feel like he's a guarantee. He's obviously high ownership as well as 62.9%. And he's also got pretty good fixtures for the next 2 game weeks. So yep, completely happy with Bukayo Saka's performance. Obviously Mohamed Salah, he had a goal ruled out for offside, which was very, very tight. It was marginally offside. And then he also got the assist as well. So yeah, I was pretty happy with Salah. Again, he was one of those players, like I mentioned at the start of the video, who was nailed on 100%, guaranteed has to be in my team. He still does have 28.7% ownership, despite the fact that he is not in the FPL template. But yeah, for me, he has to be in your team, because even though Liverpool have all these problems, they were pretty terrible last season too, but Salah still had 19 goals, 12 assists last season, and despite the problems that Liverpool have right now with no defensive midfielder, I still think that their attack is really good. They've got really good depth in their attack, and if anybody's going to score or be involved in the goal, it's going to be Mohamed Salah. So yeah, nailed on 100% has to be in my team, and I will be captaining him next week against Bournemouth as well, despite the fact I have Haaland. Haaland does have Newcastle next week, and I feel like Liverpool have an easier fixture playing against Bournemouth. And that moves me on to the United duo of Marcus Rashford and Alejandro Garnacho. I mean, I was pretty disappointed with our performance, I can't lie. Garnacho in particular, the thing that I've always praised him for since he's broke into the first team is how direct and fearless he is, but I just did not see that against Wolves whatsoever. And that sort of directness that he has is why I put him in a team as my budget option in the first place, because it makes him very likely to get involved in goals. But yeah, I just did not see that yesterday, and obviously he's only a 5 million pick, so like I mentioned earlier, I can bench him if needs be. But yeah, it's kind of not clear whether he's going to start the next game or not after that performance. But despite all of that, the thing I like about Garnacho as my budget pick though is even if he's not likely to start, he's 100% coming off the bench every game. And with the additional time changes at the moment, before he probably would have been getting 20-30 minutes off the bench. There's times he could be getting 30-40 minutes off the bench now, because there's going to be like 7 to 10 minutes added on at the end of every game. So I'm not too concerned about Garnacho. I'm not in a rush to get him out, because like I say, he was kind of an enabler for my team, so that I could fit Salah in and still have a solid goalkeeper. So I'm happy with him as a budget option, even if he's coming off the bench, because he still has good potential for attack and returns. And that brings us to the front three. So the front three was João Pedro, Erling Haaland, and Ollie Watkins. Like I mentioned earlier, pretty template, nothing out of the ordinary. I was pretty happy with João Pedro's performance. Obviously, Luton were very poor, but João Pedro, as you can see here, had an XG of 1.3. He missed an absolute sitter in the game, I can't lie, but he did end up getting a penalty, and it was nice to see him actually taking the penalty, because I know obviously he has pretty high ownership of 26.5%, but it was pretty unclear whether he would be taking the penalties. He took one in pre-season, but obviously James Milner was on the pitch for Brighton, and he's been a consistent penalty taker for a lot of his career. So it was unclear, but I'm happy to see that he did take the penalty. Now, the only concerns I have about João Pedro at the moment is he's not guaranteed to start, because Brighton do have some good depth in their attack. Obviously, they've got the likes of Ferguson, they've got the likes of Enciso, they've obviously got Matoma as well. Now, the good thing about João Pedro is he can play across the front four, he can play in the 10, he can play as a 9, he can play in either wing if he wants as well. So I do think he's going to get some good minutes for Brighton, even if he doesn't start. But yes, obviously, ideally, you would like him to start, but he's, again, another budget pick, 5.5 million. Can't really go wrong with him at the moment, and I am pretty happy to have him in the squad. The other concern I have about him, though, is if you look here, so obviously he's got good fixtures for Wolves and West Ham, game week 2, game week 3. But when it gets to game week 4 and game week 5, he does have Newcastle and Man United. So I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to navigate that yet, because my only bench option at the moment is McAllister. And when I brought McAllister in, he's obviously a £6 million player. When I brought him in, I'm not going to lie, I thought Caicedo was going to Liverpool 100%. And had that happened, that would have meant that McAllister was able to push further up the pitch and play as an attacking midfielder and feed the likes of Salah, the likes of Gakpo, the likes of Diaz. But unfortunately, with the way Liverpool's squad is shaped at the moment, it means that McAllister's stuck playing a defensive midfield role. And because of that, it means that he's more involved in building the possession and holding possession for Liverpool rather than actually creating chances. So that was a bit of a disappointment. And to be honest, that's the biggest mistake I've made at the moment with my team. Unless Liverpool make a defensive midfielder signing before the window closes, I don't see McAllister being in my team long term, but I would be happy to have him in the team if Liverpool can get a DM across the line. But yeah, obviously that brings me back to the point I was making about João Pedro with those game week 4 and 5 fixtures. They are pretty difficult, and as things stand at the moment, he's probably going to be in my team anyway when they do play them, and I am probably just going to have to take the hit on that. But I'm kind of happy taking the hit on that because, like I say, you have to have cheaper players in your team like Garnacho, like João Pedro, if you're trying to stack your team like me in terms of Saka, Salah, Rashford, Onana, obviously in goal, Haaland, Watkins, so I've definitely got big potential for attacking returns in those areas, and you do have to take a hit somewhere. So yeah, obviously moving on to Erling Haaland, I don't really need to say anything about Erling Haaland. He's just a fucking robot, to be honest. Absolute cyborg, scored another 2 goals. Obviously he was my captain as well, so yeah. I mean, to be honest, having Haaland in your team right now is just a necessity. And it's annoying because you don't even get happy when Haaland scores for your FPL team because he's owned by literally 90% of the league. So it's kind of just like, oh, Haaland scored again. So like everybody's getting points. Obviously, Haaland has a pretty difficult fixture next week against Newcastle. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm probably going to captain Salah because Salah has Bournemouth. And there's absolutely no point in having Salah if you're not going to captain him when Haaland has a tough fixture and Salah has a good fixture. So yeah, I'm going to be captaining Salah next week. That might come back to bite me because Haaland, like I said, is an absolute cyborg, and knowing him, he'll probably just go bag a hat-trick against Newcastle because he can. But yeah, on paper, it's a tough fixture, and Bournemouth for Liverpool is a more favourable fixture, so I will be captaining Salah. And then last but not least, Ollie Watkins. I was pretty happy with him just for the fact that he got an assist in a game where they got battered. Like I mentioned when I was talking about Matty Cash earlier, I'm not concerned about Villa despite the fact they got battered 5-1. They were obviously playing a very dangerous high line, but I feel like that's going to be more effective against the likes of Everton and Burnley, who they've got in game week 2 and game week 3. But like I said, obviously Watkins is 8 million, and if Jackson hits the ground running against West Ham, probably I'm going to take Ollie Watkins out and bring Jackson in, just because that gives me another million to play around with and potentially bring Chilwell in, potentially even look at bringing a 6.5 million midfielder in, like Matoma or Madison or someone like that. Now, one last thing I do want to cover is, obviously I was just speaking about Ollie Watkins and how he's 8 million and there is cheaper options available. One of those cheaper options is right here, Alexander Isak. Obviously, he scored 2 goals against Aston Villa, so a lot of people right now are panic transferring him in. He was 7.5 million, but he's already had that price increase to 7.6 because so many people are panic transferring him in. And it's exactly that, panic. For me personally, I will not be transferring Alexander Isak in, despite the fact he scored 2 goals, despite the fact he looked sharp. And the reason for that is the fixtures. So he has Manchester City next, he has Liverpool in game week 3, and he has Brighton in game week 4. Now, that's not me saying he's not going to go and score against those teams, because he has potential to do that. He could go and score against those teams. But the issue for me is he has those 3 fixtures, and then you have the Champions League starting in September as well. And then that's potentially when the rotation comes in with Wilson. Because you have to remember that Newcastle have 2 strong number 9s, and they will be rotating. So, yeah. I'm not 100% sure about Isak right now. I will obviously be keeping an eye on him because he's a very good player, but I won't be bringing him in anytime soon, simply just for the fact of those 3 fixtures and then obviously the Champions League rotation coming in September. So that's just something to keep in mind. Obviously, if you want Isak and you think he's a really good player, absolutely go ahead and go and get him. But for me personally, I won't be bringing him in because I do think there's better options. I think, for example, Jackson, like I mentioned before, if he can hit the ground running against West Ham, he has a really good set of fixtures coming up. And obviously Chelsea don't have any European football to worry about this season because they finished 12th last season, by the way, if anyone forgot. But yeah, that's going to be everything for this week. And if you do have any questions or you want to see any sort of FPL content on this channel, make sure to leave a comment below. Let me know what you want to see. And also for anybody new here, make sure to join our community Discord. We have a lot of people who are FPL mad, football mad, and there's a lot of constant interaction in there. So make sure to join the Discord. The link will be in the description below. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will be back next game week with another review. Peace.